American society is as soft as it has ever been. There has never been a point in this great nation's history in which our society has been softer than it is now. And no, that's not what I'm going to say that's going to get me canceled. That's not even the icing on the cake. Trust me. You know, we live in times in which if you say anything that offends anyone, you get permanently locked up for life under the social media jailhouse. And here's how this cancel culture thing is working, though. You might say something today that's perfectly okay, but 2 years from now, somebody gets offended by what you said 2 years before, then you're locked up underneath the social media jailhouse permanently for life. So here's how it works. This is the only way in which we're going to get past this softness and we're going to become hard and firm again. Freudian slip into that, and you're going to understand once I get into the meat and potatoes of what I got to say. And that is if we just come out and say what we have to say. And if people get offended or if they melt because they're too soft, that's their problem, not our societies as a whole. All right, so I'm going to tell you a brief story to illustrate my point, to get to what I'm talking about. Originally, I was going to label this video, I was going to title this video, Attention All Mothers of Sons, because that's particularly who I'm talking about here. Now, did I change it to be more clickbaitish so that I would lure in fathers of sons or fathers of daughters or mothers of daughters or parents in general? Absolutely not. I did it because that's the business I work in, social media. You want to know what a story's all about before you hear it or read it? Go back to buying newspapers. That's how it works. This is social media. Okay, now that you're here, here's what's going on. So I'm very observant. Some folks would call it hypervigilant, and yes, I would agree with that term. Something I picked up in a not so pleasant place called Iraq. Brought it home with me. Can't turn it off. I notice things going on around me that others don't. Kept me alive then. Keeps me safe here. One of the things I noticed recently, though, at my son's football practices and games, is there were a couple of boys on the team who weren't quite taking things very seriously. One of them not at all. One, he would go to practice and he would goof off and he would play around. No, yes, I understand. Big important part of sports is to have fun. I just ran 3 miles, a little 3-mile morning jog. If I didn't have fun doing it, I wouldn't do it, okay? The other kid was well-behaved, on point most of the time. He was a little bit influential. And when this other kid, the jokester, the prankster, kind of pulled him over towards his direction as far as swayed him into participating more in his behaviors, he could kind of goof off and kind of disrupt practice a little bit as well. Well, these guys have been on this team for 2 seasons now, same team, with my son as well. So the coach had enough here a couple of weeks ago. What the kids were doing, it's flag football. So, you know, you run the play and to quote unquote tackle the player, you pull their flag. They wear like flags here on their wrist or on their waist. You pull the flag, play's dead. It's a wonderful, I had my doubts about flag football. I thought it was for sissies, but let me tell you, it's a great way to start the game of football because you learn the fundamentals. You learn the positions, the plays, what you're supposed to do, and then you also find out whether or not you like it. And then if you want to advance past that, because typically it ends around grade 8, then you can go into tackle with an understanding of the game already, okay? But then you might say, well, it's not really for me, and I don't really want that guy that's 6'6" and weighs 280 pounds hitting me when he's running as fast as he can. I would never have gotten into that. So anyway, these kids, these 2 boys, after each play, while the defense was going back to their huddle and the offense was going back to their huddle, the guy that was always goofing off and playing around, he was constantly pulling kids' flags. You know, as they were going back to the huddle, pull the flag, and he knew he wasn't supposed to do it. This isn't like I didn't know any better thing, because he always did it when the coach wasn't looking. And sometimes the other kids would tell the coach, and the coach would have to say something. Well, on this particular day, a couple weeks ago, this kid, he had swayed the other kid that was a little bit, influenceable into doing the same thing. So they're going around pulling flags. Coach caught him. He yelled at him. And that's part of being a coach. That's part of being an athlete on a team. You better be prepared to be yelled at. But you know what? If you just do what you're supposed to do and you give it your all and you have your best, you probably will never get yelled at. I was a collegiate level athlete. I don't think I ever had a coach yell at me because I did what I was supposed to do, okay? Now, at the end of practice, the coach has a firm talk with the entire team. The entire team. I was there. I'm one of those parents that actually goes to practice, watches practice, helps out if needed at practice, and watches the games. I'm not one of these parents that goes and drops the kid off and run errands or sits in the car and scrolls on my phone and ignores the kid and what's going on. A lot of that. I call them absentee parents. They might be there, but they're not. Okay? That's not part of being there. So he gives a very firm talk to the team after practice. The kid, the main jokester, everybody leaves. He goes, gets in the car with his mother. She wasn't even there. She never heard anything that was said. So any information she would have information that was relayed to her by her son. The other kid, the kid that's a little bit influential, by the way, who I'll point out, something about this kid, last season, he didn't even know how to catch a football. Couldn't catch a ball. But through hard work and through taking it seriously, he can catch a ball now, right? He's pretty good. He's okay. So his mother was there. She goes to the practices. She watches. She knows what's going on. And no, she's not the mother of an only child. She has 3 daughters. She's got this boy, 3 girls. Her and her husband they split stuff up. Sometimes when they can, they go to the same thing, but they don't go and drop the kids off and run errands. They don't sit in their car and scroll on their phone and then make decisions based upon hearsay. They are actively involved in their children's lives, okay? So you see him walking back to his car with his mom, and she's smacking him in the back of the head. What are you doing goofing off at practice? You guys aren't good enough of a team to be goofing off like practice. Don't you disrespect the coach like that. Don't you disrespect your team like that. She gave him another lecture on top of the lecture the coach gave, okay? And the coach told him, he said, when he was giving him this lecture, he said, this is not a play date. He says, this is practice. Yes, we're here to have fun. Yes, we're here to learn. We're here to get better, but we're also here to win games. And when we're goofing off at practice, we're going to be goofing off in game time, and we're not going to win. He just told him, okay? And by the way, the jokester, during the games, he would just go up and down the sidelines telling everybody jokes. He wouldn't even be cheering on. Like if he was offense, he wouldn't be cheering on the defense. If he was defense, he wouldn't be on the sidelines cheering on his offense. He would disrupt the kids that were telling them jokes. Okay? So, the mother of that child, the jokester, just sends this group text about how her son is no longer on that team. He will now be on this other team. And how having fun is always a win in her book. And went on, just gave some passive-aggressive lecture. It was like, well, okay, whatever. Her choice, her son, her kid, whatever. The other kid stayed. He stayed on the team. And at the next practice, he apologized to the coach and his teammates in a group huddle for distracting them by pulling their flags in between plays. Coach never asked him to do that. His mother might have, his father might have, but the kid did that. Okay, and this is a soft-spoken kid. He doesn't talk much. So that following weekend was game weekend, right? The kid that had transferred to the other team their teams happened to be playing on the field before our team's game. He didn't get any game time. He did not get in the game. He rode the bench the entire game because we get there an hour early. We warm up. We go over strategies. Kid never got in the game. Now, one of the things that my son's coach does that he does well, that I think he does better than any coach out there, a couple others do a good job of this too. He makes sure every kid on that team gets playing time, and he makes sure they get a near equal amount of playing time. He doesn't just play, there's six guys on the field in flag football. He doesn't just play his best 6 guys 90% of the game and sub some of the other guys in and out 10% of the game. There's 2 or 3 that he'll keep in for the majority of the game because they are that good and they are that serious. These are the kids who, like my son, when he's home every day, he's out here in the field throwing a football, playing a football because he takes it seriously. The coach sees that. But, okay, there's 17 kids. It's a big team. He subs those 17 kids, minus maybe the 3 or 4 that play most of the game, but the other 14 are in about 90% of the game. He is the only coach in this league of, I think, 12 teams that does this. He's been coaching for decades. He's nearly 60. He's an older guy. He does it well. And we've talked to him. We have so much respect for this guy because he says, I'm not just coaching football players. I'm not coaching athletes. I'm helping mold young boys into what will someday be men, what will be the men, the leaders of this nation. He's helping boys learn how to become men. He's doing an amazing thing. And he knows that in order to make that happen, he's got to have those kids that might not be that good at catching, might not be that fast at running, get in that game and get in that high pressure situation and have that pressure right in front of their face so they can learn how to react to it. And so that they can learn that if they don't react well to it, it's not the end of the world. It is a sport, it is a game, but guess what? Life goes on. Let's get a little bit better by behaving in practice, being serious in practice, focusing in practice, and do a little bit better in the next game. And he does it with all the kids, not just his key players. So we watched and we noticed that the kid whose mother, didn't like her son being lectured for misbehaving, I guess, being undisciplined, pulled him off the team, sent him to another team. He rode the bench. Our game was next. We played a team that has only lost 4 games in 4 years. Those 4 games they lost were against the team that has won the title in this league for the last 4 years. And that team has only scored once against this team that's only lost 4 times. Nobody scores on this team. Nobody beats them except the league champions the last 4 years. Basically, those 2 teams, on any given day, if they played 10 times, one team would win 5 times, the other team would win 5. That's how good these 2 teams are. So we play that team. My son's team plays that team. They beat us, but we scored. They beat us 21-7, but we scored. We are the only team other than the league championship to score on this team in 4 years. You know who scored? It was the kid who was goofing off with the other kid, who was going around pulling flags in between plays, in between huddles, who stood there like a young man and took his lecture, and whose mommy did not pull him off the team and put him on another team, but who smacked him, not in any sort of painful corporal punishment type way, but in a get your attention kind of way, in the back of the head, and said, do not disrespect the coach, do not disrespect the team, do not disrespect our family by going there and assing off like that, like you're on a play date instead of football practice. That's the kid who scored the touchdown. He was a center, and he ran out. Everybody, we made it look like we were going wide, and he just ran right across the goal line, turned around, and caught the ball. Only score of the game, only score against that team other than the league champions in 4 years. The kid who was allowed to be molded from a boy into a man. So here's what I have to say that's going to get me canceled. You can argue this until the cows come home. I firmly believe, and I've been around this third rock from the sun enough to see this. A woman cannot teach a boy how to become a man any more than a man can teach a girl how to become a woman. And I'm not talking about sexual orientation, gender identification, none of that shit. So don't call me something I'm not. There's more to being a man than being in possession of the proper plumbing. Okay? And I served in Iraq with women who are more of a man than most men where I live. And I'm not saying that they were masculine, none of these things. They were very feminine. And you dress them up, put them in a dress and put makeup on them, and they're the prettiest girls you ever saw. But they took charge. They did their jobs. They did them well. They rode on the machine gun through Mosul, Iraq, when it was Al-Qaeda in Iraq's last urban stronghold. You know why? Because they were not soft. They were hard. They were firm. They were strong. They were responsible. They were leaders. And now in their private lives, they still are. Tell you, one of my wife's best friends, and I'm not going to name drop here. If you saw her, you'd say, oh, what a cute, sweet, petite little Filipino lady. Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army, multiple combat tours, and she would kick my ass. If we got in a fight, she would kick my ass. She doesn't hate men. She's married and has a couple of boys. As feminine as they get. Beautiful when she fixes herself up. So don't put words into my mouth. You know exactly what I'm saying. Listen, I've had this conversation recently with a neighbor and a friend of mine, the coach. I was talking about this at the UVA football game this past weekend, and a man who was beside me, turns out he's an 8th grade teacher up in Warrenton, Virginia, Northern Virginia, overheard me, and he kind of invited himself into the conversation. I didn't care. It was a football game. That's what happens. He's a teacher in middle school, and he says, he gave me a term I've never heard. I'm going to share it with you now. Maybe you've heard it. It's called helicopter parents. These are the parents that just hover. And he did state, he notices there are so many women who, in my opinion, are destroying the next generation of young men in this country because they are not allowing them to be molded into men, because they hover and they hover and they hover. They don't let the teachers do their jobs. They don't let the coaches do their jobs. And if anybody raises their voice to them, they pull them out of the situation and put them into a different situation. This leads to young males, which I won't call young men, young males who never leave home. If they do go out and get a job, it's only going to last until a supervisor asks them to do something they don't want to do, or maybe raises their voice to them because they're not doing it quick enough or in the way they've been told to do it repeatedly. Then it's run back to mommies. The next generation of young men in this country, I'm concerned, and I'm not the only one. And you say, well, what's it matter? Well, I guess if you're maybe from an affluent area like Charlottesville, Virginia, and you're from an affluent class, you say it might not matter because you got money. We've got these nice houses, and we've got these trust funds, and we got all these things. Let me tell you something you don't have if you've never achieved anything on your own. Confidence. A true feeling of self-worth. Let me tell you, there is a feeling that comes with achievement that those who have never achieved will never know, and it's worth more than any amount of money in the bank. I know. Am I rich? No. But I tell you, I ain't hurting, okay? And there's been times, let me tell you, it fluctuates. I work in social media. I'm a writer. There's good times. When it rains, it pours. There's bad times. We had a joke when I was a stockbroker because it was commissions. You get paid. You have great months, bad months. Sometimes you go out and you buy your wife a new dress because it was such a good month, and the next month you're telling her to go hawk the dress at the pawn shop because you need the money to buy ramen noodles. It's not that extreme, but that's a good scenario, a good analogy of what it's like. Massive amounts of money in my bank. I've received paychecks so big I didn't think my bank was going to accept the deposit. Seriously. That never made me feel as good as winning a race that I trained hard to win. Doing something physically that I didn't think I could do. Scoring the highest PT score on all of Fort Benning, Georgia in the year 2007. Home of the infantry, the Rangers, Green Berets, Special Forces, paratroopers, airborne. 2007, nobody on that post scored as high as me. I was 35 years old when I did it. Winning world-renowned journalism awards, getting put on the map, having talking heads, a-holes from CNN and Fox News calling me when I'm down and out in the Philippines because I wrote a story that goes mega viral, and they're asking me to be their veterans correspondent on their legacy mainstream media network. Those calls, even though these guys were assholes, felt better than any amount of money I ever had in the bank. Okay? Most insecure guy I ever knew, and I'm going to wrap it up with this because I think I've made my point, and you guys can go cancel me now, throw me under the social media jailhouse for life. Trust baby, his mother was the largest shareholder of a particular corporation, and I'm not going to say it because people around where I live, they would know this family. Outside of institutional investors, outside of mutual funds and retirement plans, this guy's mother owned more shares of this particularly large publicly traded company than any individual in the world. They got tens of millions every quarter when the dividend was paid. Her son, who was a good friend of mine, was the most insecure person I ever knew. I loved him like a brother. He was one of the closest things I've ever had to a brother in my life. He had a massive farm. He had horses. He had, he had exotic animals. I'm going to leave it at that. He had no sense of self-worth, no sense of self-esteem because he had never accomplished anything. Mommy always took care of him. And if he would put himself in situations where he could win, where he could succeed, just so he could get that feeling of winning and succeeding. But if things got tough for him, Mommy would pull him out of that situation. There were times in life when he made mistakes and he should have faced up to those mistakes, but Mommy pulled him out of having to pay the piper. He struggled with drugs and alcohol most of his life, and he ended his life by getting shit-faced drunk and running his car into another car. Killed himself and put the other guy he hit in a wheelchair for life. Very sad story, very sad story. We're not raising children, as Jim Stump over at Counselor's Couch 101 says. Go like and subscribe and watch his videos. We are not raising children, people. We are raising the next generation of adults. Keep that in mind the next time you want to hover. Might see you for more next time, unless I get canceled. We're going to find out.